Hi, could you introduce yourself?
My name is William Brewer. I'm 57 years old. I live in Trussville, Alabama.
Your mother, my grandmother, had dementia. What form of dementia did she have?
I don't think it was ever identified. At that time, when she had the dementia, they weren't able to even specifically identify dementia except post mortem. So they went by certain tests to determine whether they felt the patient had dementia or not.
Did y'all do any kind of post-mortem autopsy?
No, we did not.
Okay. When did you start to notice a decline in her mental health?
Thinking back, I can remember around roughly 1998. Um, It was a period in my life where there were some changes and that she needed to be present for certain functions. And I was noticing her being a bit more feeble. And considering she was born in 1920, obviously, age was catching up with her. But I just noticed that her mental acuity was not quite as sharp as it used to be. And that particular time, it just stuck out in my mind. There was something starting to happen.
How did you help facilitate independent living as she progressed?
Well, as we would talk, and she always had a fear of developing dementia because the dementia runs fairly strong on her side of the family. And even as a child, I remember her as a nurse talking to me what she wanted to have happen if she came down with dementia and her fear of that. So we had roughly planned out what would occur at that time. But there again, you can't plan for that because you don't know what life changes brings about. So when I started noticing the dementia occur, we started doing little stopgap measures, things like the oven being left on. I started putting numbers on the dials to make them larger to ensure that she turns it off, and little notes, turn the oven off, things of that nature, all the way down to the driving issues. When you started having the small accidents occur, the scrapes, the bumps, all the way up to an actual accident.
Mm.
So it just progressed small, but unfortunately, in her case, it progressed fairly quickly uh, compared to some other patients that I know of.
At what point did you know it was time for her to move in and receive continual care from the family?
Well, we'd been dealing with her forgetfulness, leaving the stoves on, the car wrecks. We were quite open in our discussions with it, and then one day she had went outside into the front yard and she had gotten to the curb and fell and landed face first on the concrete and
Mm.
injured herself quite badly. And that was when we knew, along with not only the forgetfulness but the loss of mobility and the um, I guess you'd say the dizziness or the lack of the ability to stand unaided, it just kind of came to a head at that point when she had harmed herself. And then we started discussing moving her in with us.
How was what was the impact on the primary caretakers, you, mom, I guess even essentially myself? How did that impact the family?
Well, you and your sister were quite young at the time, and your mother and I discussed it, and we had made a plan that we would sell her house and use the profits from that to convert our current house into a two-level home, which at the time it was a finished basement, but it was not finished off for living. So we talked to her and agreed to that, and we actually did that. We sold her house, and we took the money and we took our house, which at the time was a three-bedroom, two-bath house, and turned it into a five-bedroom, three-bathroom house with a great room,
Mm-hmm.
and with the intention that we would primarily, you, your sister, and I, and your mother would live downstairs, and your grandmother would occupy the upstairs one level, and we would have separate living facilities, but yet still being able to co live together and have some privacy, but yet still have the continuity as a family. And that was our ultimate goal.
Would you say that over the course of her living here and taking care of her, did that put any amount of stress and burden on the family?
Initially, no. Stress was on her because she was cognizant enough to realize that her mental acuity was going downhill. She saw it, she knew it was coming. It distressed her greatly, and she was very depressed because of it. As far as to our family, we had to struggle with her depression and being upset about knowing what was coming. But in a, and I hate to say this in a good way, but her dementia took stair steps. When it went downhill, it went downhill quickly, and then it leveled off, and it went downhill quickly again. So by the time that she actually had reached her lowest levels, she no longer realized she was in that situation. Now, not all families experience that. They experience a slow decline, which is, in my opinion, is even worse. My mother only suffered for Alzheimer's probably roughly knowingly about 4 years. And um, that was easier on the family, but it was also more devastating on the family because we didn't have time to prepare for the next lower step when it happened. And it literally would happen overnight.
Yeah, I remember it being very visible even to me in high school. You wake up the next morning and something would be radically different with her.
A new person there,
Mm-hmm.
literally.
So, knowing that there is a family history there, um, how how are you processing the possibility that you may eventually wind up with some form of dementia?
Well, naturally, I'm going to take care of my finances as well as possible, and I will keep you and your sister apprised of what my financial and abilities are, but there's just not a whole lot you can do, especially in the state of Alabama. I dealt with a similar situation with a first cousin in Florida, and it was just absolutely wonderful how the support mechanism was there. That support mechanism is not here in the state of Alabama. So there's not a lot of preparations I can do. I know what steps to take if things start going badly, and I've talked to you and your sister about that. But ultimately, it's going to be financially and emotionally devastating to the family, regardless of the support mechanism. Just, I do tend to compare the two states in the similar situations, and I'm just absolutely amazed at the difference.
Do you have any other um, bits of information that you would like to add to this?
Well, all I can say is it really helped getting through the situation with the entire family support between the spouse, the husband, the children, and finally getting into the social system that needed to be involved with it, whether it be Medicare or Medicaid. It's a tough road, and when it starts, go ahead and get started on it early, and do not put it off, and don't go into denial. Just deal with it and prepare for it, and come together as a family.
All right, well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
Bye.